In the early hours of the 5th of January, 2019, a 52-year-old restaurateur named Kiyoshi Kimura raised his hand in a warehouse in Tokyo Bay and bought a single fish for 333 million yen. The tuna weighed 278 kilograms. It had been caught off Aomori in northern Japan. The price worked out at roughly $3 million, or about $11,000 per kilogram, for an animal that would be broken down and served over the following 2 days. It was the highest price ever paid for a fish anywhere in the world. It was also the first New Year auction held at Toyosu, because 3 months earlier, the market where that ritual had been performed for 83 years had closed, and by the following spring, most of it had been demolished. At its height, Tsukiji handled more than 2,000 tons of seafood in a single morning, across upwards of 400 species, and moved well over 1 billion yen of product a day. The prices set on that floor were the reference prices for bluefin tuna on 3 continents. By the time it closed, its volume had fallen to roughly half of what it had been. And if you go looking for Tsukiji today, you will find it open, crowded, full of visitors eating tuna off skewers at 8 in the morning. That is not the market. That is the shopping street that grew up outside the market. The market is a construction site. To understand how a city loses the largest fish market on Earth, you have to understand that Tsukiji was never really a building. It was an accumulation, and the part that mattered was the part that could not be moved. Tokyo's fish market is older than Tokyo. In 1603, when Tokugawa Ieyasu established his government at Edo, he had a problem that every pre-modern capital had: feeding a garrison town that was about to become enormous. Among the solutions was to import fishermen. He brought a group from the village of Tsukuda near Osaka and gave them fishing rights in Edo Bay in exchange for supplying the castle. The arrangement had a natural surplus. Whatever the castle did not take, the fishermen sold on the riverbank at Nihonbashi, at the foot of the bridge that marked the 0 point of every highway in Japan. That informal riverside trade became the uogashi, the fish quay. It stayed there for 300 years. By the late Edo period, it was one of the great commercial engines of the city, with its own guilds, its own credit arrangements, and its own dynasties of wholesalers whose families had held the same pitch for generations. Nihonbashi appears in the woodblock prints of the period as a crush of baskets, poles, and men moving at speed. There was no plan behind it. It was where it was because a shogun had needed sea bream in 1603. On the 1st of September, 1923, at 2 minutes to noon, the Great Kanto earthquake struck. The shaking destroyed a substantial part of Tokyo. The fires that followed, driven by a typhoon offshore, destroyed most of the rest. Somewhere in the region of 140,000 people died across the Kanto region. Nihonbashi burned. 3 centuries of fish market ended in an afternoon. The trade had to go somewhere immediately because Tokyo still needed feeding. The city moved it to a temporary site at Shibaura, then to a plot in a district called Tsukiji. The name is a description. Tsukiji means constructed ground. The land had been reclaimed from Edo Bay in the 1650s in the aftermath of the Great Mariki Fire, using rubble and earth cleared from the burnt city. It had held the foreign settlement after Japan opened, and then the Navy's medical facilities. It was flat, it was on the water, and it was empty. The move was supposed to be temporary. The permanent building opened in 1935, and its most famous feature is the one that almost nobody can explain when they see it. Tsukiji was built as a curve. From the air, the main wholesale hall is a great arc, a fan opening toward the Sumida River, and it looks like an aesthetic decision. It is not. It is a railway. The market was designed around a freight spur that branched off the Tokaido line and ran directly into the building. Refrigerated wagons came in along the curve, and the arc existed so that wagons could be unloaded along its length simultaneously, with the wholesalers arranged behind them in order. Fish arrived in Tokyo by rail, and the building was a machine for taking it off trains. The freight line closed in 1984. For the last 34 years of its life, the largest fish market in the world operated inside a shape that had been designed for a technology that no longer existed. Everything arrived by lorry into a building with no lorry access worth the name, along a curve that made every internal journey longer than it needed to be. The people who worked there navigated it perfectly because they had grown up in it. What happened inside that curve every morning had a rhythm that had not substantially changed since before the war. Fish arrived through the night. By 3 in the morning, the tuna were laid out in rows on the concrete floor of the auction hall, frozen ones giving off vapor in the cold, fresh ones on pallets, each with a section of tail cut away so that buyers could inspect the flesh. Buyers walked the rows with torches and hooks, cutting slivers, rubbing them between their fingers, looking at fat content and color and texture. This is the part of the process that cannot be written down. A senior buyer could estimate the eating quality of a 200-kilogram animal from a strip of tail meat, and the good ones were right often enough to build a career on it. At around 5:30, a handbell rang. The auctioneer stood on a wooden box and began, and what followed was largely unintelligible to anyone who had not learned it. The chant compressed price and lot into a stream of syllables at speed. The buyers bid with their hands, a system called tayari, in which finger positions signal digits, delivered fast and often held close to the chest so competitors could not read them. An entire tuna could sell in under 10 seconds. The structure underneath was specific and rigidly licensed. A small number of large wholesale companies held the right to run auctions and to take consignments from producers. Below them sat the intermediate wholesalers, the nakoroshi, each with a numbered stall on the market floor. At the market's peak, there were around 1,600 of them. By the end, there were closer to 500. These were mostly family businesses, frequently in their 3rd or 4th generation, and most of them were extremely specialized. A stall that sold only sea urchin, a stall that sold only conger eel, a stall whose entire trade was in the specific grades of tuna belly used by perhaps 30 restaurants in Tokyo. Around them moved the turret trucks. The Toretto, a small flatbed with a huge upright cylindrical steering column, invented for Tsukiji and produced for essentially no other purpose. Hundreds of them ran the aisles at once, at speed, without any rules of the road that a visitor could identify. And at the back were the tools. A tuna is broken down with a maguro bocho, a blade that in its largest form runs to well over a meter, closer to a sword than a knife, worked by 2 people, and sharpened daily by specialists who did nothing else. None of this was designed. All of it had accreted over decades around a curve built for trains. The market had been open for 6 years when the auction was abolished. In 1942, with the war going badly, Japan placed its food supply under state control. Rice, then everything else. Fish distribution was brought inside a national allocation system. Catches were requisitioned, prices were fixed, and the product was distributed by quota rather than sold. The mechanism that had defined the Tokyo fish trade since the 17th century, competitive bidding, price discovered in public in the open by shouting, was simply switched off. The wholesalers stayed. They became administrators of a rationing scheme, distributing steadily less fish to a city that was steadily hungrier. On the night of the 9th of March 1945, 300 American bombers came in low over Tokyo carrying incendiaries. The raid burned roughly 40 square kilometers of the city. The wards east of the Sumida, Fukagawa, Honjo, Asakusa were densely built in wood, and the fire consumed them almost completely. Estimates of the dead run to around 100,000 people in a single night. It remains the deadliest air raid in history. Tsukiji is on the western bank, on reclaimed ground, and its main structure was reinforced concrete built in 1935 to a standard that assumed earthquakes. The market survived. Most of the people who worked in it lived on the other side of the river. For the next several years, the building operated at a fraction of its capacity, distributing rations under a system that could not feed the city. What actually fed Tokyo in those years was the yami-ichi, the black market, which sprang up outside every major station and handled a large share of everything eaten in the capital. Fish moved through it too, brought in from the coast on trains by people carrying it in rucksacks, sold at prices no ration book covered. The auction returned around 1950, and with it, the bell, the chant, and the hand signals, restarted by men who had learned them before the war and taught them to men who had not. 4 years later, a boat came into a port in Shizuoka with something wrong with the crew. The Daigo Fukuryu Maru, Lucky Dragon number 5, was a tuna longliner with 23 men aboard. On the 1st of March 1954, It was fishing east of Bikini Atoll, outside the exclusion zone the Americans had declared, when the United States detonated a thermonuclear device with a yield far larger than its designers had predicted. The crew watched the sky go white to the west. About 3 hours later, ash began falling on the deck. They handled it. Some of them tasted it. They spent the rest of the day hauling in their gear under it, then sailed for home with the catch in the hold. They reached Yaizu on the 14th of March with radiation sickness. The radio operator, Kuboyama Akichi, died that September. The fish went to market. When the story broke, health authorities put Geiger counters on the quaysides and then on the market floors, including Tsukiji. Tuna that registered above the threshold was condemned. Enormous quantities of it were destroyed and buried, some of it in a pit dug on the Tsukiji site itself. The effect on demand was immediate and total. Japanese consumers stopped buying fish. Prices at Tsukiji collapsed. Wholesalers who had survived the war and the rationing were wiped out in a matter of weeks by a bomb test 3,000 kilometers away. The market recovered, and it recovered into the best conditions it would ever have. Through the 1950s and 1960s, Japan rebuilt its distant water fishing fleet and sent it everywhere. Japanese longliners worked the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, and the Eastern Pacific. Freezer technology improved to the point that a vessel could stay at sea for a year and come home with a hold full of tuna at -60 degrees. By the early 1970s, Japan was landing more fish than any other nation on Earth and eating more per person than any other nation on Earth, and essentially all of it that mattered came through this building. Then, in 1977, the ocean was enclosed. Within roughly 2 years, the United States, the Soviet Union, and a long list of coastal states declared exclusive economic zones extending 200 nautical miles from their shores. Waters that Japanese vessels had fished for decades became foreign territory overnight, accessible only by negotiated license and quota. Japan's distant water catch began a decline. It never reversed. The market did not notice because something else was happening at the same time that more than compensated for it. The peak came with the money. Through the 1980s, Japan's asset bubble put an enormous amount of disposable income into the hands of a population that spent a great deal of it on food. Corporate entertainment budgets were effectively unlimited. Expensive sushi became a routine business expense. At the same time, sushi went global. The mechanism was air freight and a change in Western taste, and the two reinforced each other. Bluefin tuna caught off Massachusetts, which American fishermen had until recently sold for cat food prices, was being gutted, chilled, and flown to Narita overnight, and the price it fetched at Tsukiji the next morning was reported back to the docks in Gloucester by fax. Tsukiji became the price-setting mechanism for a global commodity. What a fish was worth in Cape Town, in Malta, in Nova Scotia, was determined by what a room of buyers in Tokyo would pay for it at 5:30 in the morning. Annual throughput ran into the hundreds of thousands of tons. On a peak day, the market moved well over 2,000 tons and turned over more than 1.5 billion yen. It was, by volume and by value, the largest wholesale seafood market that has ever existed. And it was at the same time quietly beginning to fail. But the deeper problem was distribution, and it was ticking like a clock from the beginning of the 1990s. The traditional wholesale market exists to solve a matching problem. Thousands of small boats land unpredictable catches. Thousands of small restaurants need specific fish in small quantities. Neither can find the other efficiently. So everything passes through a central floor where price is discovered by auction. That model depends on both ends staying fragmented. They did not. Through the 1990s and 2000s, Japanese food retail consolidated. Supermarket chains and large restaurant groups grew large enough that they no longer needed the market to find supply. They contracted directly with producers, aquaculture operations, and importers, negotiated annual volumes, and had products shipped to their own distribution centers. Every time a chain did this, a slice of Tsukiji's throughput disappeared permanently. The proportion of Japanese seafood passing through the public wholesale market system fell year after year. Tsukiji's volumes peaked around the end of the 1980s and then declined for roughly 3 decades, with only minor interruptions. The number of Nakoroshi stalls fell with it. Families that had held the same pitch since the 1930s closed because the third generation could see the arithmetic and went to work somewhere else. Underneath that sat the building itself. Tsukiji was not refrigerated. The wholesale hall was open at the sides, which is what gave it the light that photographers loved, and which also meant that ambient summer temperature in Tokyo was the operating temperature of the market floor. Birds got in. So did other things. It had asbestos. Its drainage was pre-war. It could not meet the closed cold chain standards that the European Union and other export markets increasingly required, which meant Japanese exporters were beginning to route around it. And it had a land problem. Tsukiji occupies roughly 23 hectares in Chuo Ward. It is a 15-minute walk from Ginza. It has water frontage. It is, on almost any measure, among the most valuable undeveloped urban land anywhere in the world, and it was being used to store fish in an unair-conditioned shed. The Tokyo metropolitan government had wanted to move the market since the 1980s. The site it chose was Toyosu, about 2.5 kilometers away across the bay on reclaimed land in Kodo Ward. The land had been a Tokyo gas coal gasification plant. Gasworks sites are among the most reliably contaminated industrial land there is. Testing at Toyosu found benzene, cyanide, and arsenic in the soil and groundwater in places at multiples of the legal limits. The remediation program was extensive and expensive. Contaminated soil removed, treatment applied, and critically, a layer of clean soil specified to be laid beneath the market buildings as a barrier. The move was scheduled for November 2016. In August of that year, weeks before it was due to happen, the newly elected governor of Tokyo, Koike Yuriko, halted it. What emerged over the following months was that beneath the main buildings, the specified layer of clean soil had not been installed. Instead, there were voids, empty spaces under the structures. Groundwater monitoring subsequently returned benzene readings far above the environmental standard. There followed nearly 2 years of investigations, expert panels, parliamentary questioning, and a public argument conducted largely on television. Additional countermeasures were installed. The total cost of the Toyosu project ran to something in the region of 600 billion yen. The market traders, who had been living with an announced closure date since the early 2000s, spent that period unable to plan. Some had already bought equipment for the new site. Some had already closed. A group of them fought the move in court and lost. The relocation was eventually rescheduled for October 2018. Tsukiji's last day of trading was the 6th of October 2018. The market had operated, with the exception of Sundays, holidays, and the New Year, since 1935. It had worked through the war. It had worked through the firebombing of Tokyo, in which the surrounding wards burned. On the final morning, the auctions ran as normal. Then, when the trading finished, the workers did something that had not been organized by anyone. Turret trucks lined up and drove out of the building in convoy. Men who had spent 40 years on that floor stood in the aisles and applauded the building. Others turned at the gate and bowed to it. What followed was one of the strangest logistical operations Tokyo has ever performed. Roughly 900 businesses had to move from one site to another over a single weekend, with no interruption to the food supply of a metropolitan area of 37 million people. Thousands of tons of equipment, live fish in tanks, refrigeration units, knives, ledgers, the contents of 500 stalls. The convoy of lorries ran continuously for days. Toyosu opened on the 11th of October 2018. There was no gap in supply. By every technical measure, Toyosu is a better market than Tsukiji. It is larger. It is fully enclosed and temperature-controlled, with an unbroken cold chain from delivery bay to dispatch. It has proper lorry access and loading docks. It meets modern hygiene standards. It has no asbestos and no birds. It is also, in a way that turned out to matter enormously, sealed. At Tsukiji, the boundary between the market and the public was almost non-existent. There were rules, and the rules were regularly ignored, and for decades visitors simply walked in. A limited number were allowed to stand in a roped area at the tuna auction. Beyond that, people wandered the aisles, got shouted at by men on turret trucks, and ate at the small restaurants tucked inside the market buildings. That was a genuine problem. It was unhygienic, it was dangerous, and it obstructed people trying to do their jobs. At Toyosu, it was solved completely. The public and the market are on different levels. Visitors walk in closed corridors and view the tuna auction through glass from a gallery above, behind a window, unable to hear anything. You can watch the largest tuna auction in the world in total silence, from a viewing platform, like an exhibit. The second thing Toyosu does not have is a neighborhood. Tsukiji sat in a dense district it had shaped over 80 years. Toyosu is 3 large buildings connected by enclosed bridges on reclaimed land, surrounded by wide roads, warehouses, and high-rise apartment blocks. There is nothing to walk to. And that turns out to be most of what Tsukiji actually was, because the wholesale market, the inner market, the Jonai Shijo, was only ever part of it. Outside it, over decades, an entire secondary district had grown up, the Jogai Shijo, the outer market. Several hundred small shops in a grid of narrow streets selling knives, ceramics, dried bonito, seaweed, pickles, green tea, tamagoyaki cooked in front of you, and every category of restaurant equipment. Those shops existed because the chefs of Tokyo already had to come to Tsukiji every morning for fish. Once you are there at 5 in the morning, you buy your knives there, and your bowls and your wasabi, and you eat breakfast there. The outer market never moved. It could not. It was hundreds of independently owned buildings on ordinary streets. So when the inner market left, the outer market lost the reason it had been built. It did not close. It did the other thing. The Tsukiji outer market today is one of the busiest visitor destinations in Tokyo. It is packed by 9 in the morning. The trade has shifted decisively from professional supply to street food. Skewers of grilled scallop, tuna on sticks, uni served in the shell, strawberry daifuku, all sold at prices calibrated to people who are on holiday. Some of the old suppliers are still there and doing well. Others have converted their frontage to takeaway counters. Some sold up. It is thriving, and it is not the same business. Meanwhile, the inner market site was cleared. It served as a car park and logistics area during the 2020 Olympics. Then it sat empty, 23 hectares of flat ground in central Tokyo, behind hoarding. In 2024, the metropolitan government selected a developer consortium for the redevelopment. The plan runs to a multi-purpose stadium of around 50,000 seats, hotels, offices, conference facilities, and a waterfront terminal, delivered in phases over more than a decade. Nothing in it is a fish market. Walk out of Tsukiji station at 7 in the morning, and the outer market is already going. Steam off the tamagoyaki griddles, a queue outside the place that does the tuna bowls, people eating standing up in the middle of the street with a phone in the other hand. Turn onto the streets behind and the older trade is still there if you look for it. A shop selling nothing but dried bonito, the blocks stacked like firewood. A shop selling nothing but bamboo strainers. 2 knife shops where a man will grind an edge back for you while you wait, and where the wall behind him still carries the maker's marks of tools sold to restaurants that closed years ago. Walk to the end of Namioka-dori, and there is a small shrine on the corner. It is called Namioka Inari, wave-calming Inari. It was founded in the 1650s, when the reclaimed ground here kept washing back into the bay, and the people building it put up a shrine to ask the sea to stop taking the land. In the courtyard there are stones. The fish traders of Tsukiji put them there over the course of the last century, and each one is a memorial to a species. There is a mound for tuna. There is one for sushi, one for eggs, donated by the tamagoyaki makers, one for shrimp, one for clams, one for shellfish generally, each with the names of the wholesalers who paid for it carved into the base. And set apart from the others, near the edge of the courtyard, there is one more. It does not commemorate a species. It marks the tuna that came into this market in the spring of 1954 and had to be buried, and the men on the boat that caught it. They were built by an industry that no longer works here. Most of those company names are now at Toyosu, 2.5 kilometers across the water, in a building the public cannot enter. The stones are still in the courtyard. The shrine still holds its festival. The ground it was built to protect is still there. Behind the hoarding at the end of the street, the curve is gone.